I am Bryce Newberger, and this is the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. Chapter 37. The deep gray blue shadowed the sunset until nothing but twinkling darkness hung over the landscape. King Denigno walked in from his balcony where he had watched the sun set over his kingdom. Often he had practiced this observance. It reminded him of how vast his responsibility really was. He had tried his whole life to be the best king he could be. He had convinced himself that there could be no better king than himself and constantly worked to earn his people's trust. Santuosa watched her husband pace about distraught. He had told her of his plan to engage in peace talks with Rysval. She didn't imagine the tyrant agreeing to a treaty that resulted in anything less than the unconditional surrender of the kingdom. Together they understood that this was the only course of action that would result in the lives of the kingdom being spared. Rysval was coming to conquer, not destroy. If he was given into, the people would continue to live under another ruler's jurisdiction. Beyond perhaps a tax increase and a changing of hands in the political field, the subjects of Eterna would not suffer any grave loss. She respected her husband for his wisdom and supported him wholeheartedly. Denigno let out a sigh. My kingdom. He spoke the words as if he were ashamed. Have I always been so prideful to think that I'm the best one to rule these people? Santuosa placed her hand on his bearded cheek and kissed his lips. You are the best one to lead these people. There is nothing you would not give for your kingdom. The couple embraced as the door creaked open. They turned their eyes to see a small face behind the entryway. The emerald eyes gleamed back at the bittersweet king and queen. Come on in, Amora, called the king. The girl stepped in sheepishly. Thank you for what you're doing, Amora said as she watched her toes shift. And how do you know what I'm going to do? Asked the king in a playfully derisive tone. I was hiding above the throne room when the elder came. I left before your final decision, but I overheard the guards talking after the meeting. The king gave Amora a troublesome stare, but she couldn't help but notice the love that his eyes still held for her. Well, I'm sorry you had to see how I acted before the wise man brought me to that conclusion. Sparren stepped in from behind Amora. Well, I think it stinks. Sparren, Santuosa acknowledged her son quizzically. The boy continued. Does this mean we won't be royals anymore? Denigno shook his head at his boy. Is that all you care about? Well, yeah, Sparren admitted. Well, my son, there is much more to being royalty than a castle and servants. Whether we have to leave the castle or not, the people always look to you as the king's son. He turned his attention to Amora as well. Both of you. You are part of a royal bloodline, whether we remain or not. Both children nodded instinctively, but had no real idea what the true implications were of that observation. Santuosa added, Our people love this family. You will become natural leaders as you grow older. Remember, then, that every action has a consequence you must pay. King beckoned them all over to the balcony where the starlit night sky twinkled over the large capital city. Children, I want you to look over the kingdom. The young children gawked at the impressive view of stone buildings and high-walled ramparts. The city was a bastioned citadel, a mighty fortress. This is your kingdom. Whether you rule it or not, you belong to it and you have a duty to serve it. Sparren smirked with pride. I will rule it. Amora had a different response. She didn't want this responsibility. She was terrified to learn she belonged to something so large. Twice now she had struggled to hold on to a small family. This showed her how much more she had to lose. Denigno began to counsel his son on the true meaning of ruling, but the lesson was lost to her as it droned on in the background. Amora dwelled on her previous family, her mother, father, Eldrich, Cal, Teddy. She had lost them all. With the threat of Grexis, how much longer could she hold on to this family? The question stabbed her like a knife in the back. The pain spread to her chest as the reality of this ate through her. Amora's small limbs grew cold and numb while her stomach felt warm and wet. She then realized the last feeling wasn't subconscious. Amora looked down to see gleaming metal was poking through her chest, covered in her blood. It was a dream she had many times in the past, but this time she knew it couldn't have been a dream. The blade was thrust out and she collapsed onto the floor, coughing on a thick liquid caught in her throat. The black, fatigued figure stepped past her. The king was facing his son, unaware of what was coming. Queen Santuosa gasped to scream, but a small blade shot from the intruder's hand and caught her in the throat. She collapsed with her hands tugging at the wound. King Denigno turned with a flash of turmoil and anguish-littered surprise. No! He threw his son far back and reached for his sword. The assassin was too close. Before the blade fully left its scabbard, the black-booted foot rose high and stepped on the pommel of the blade, forcing it back into its sheath as the murderous knife cut the king's head from his body. Sperin was screaming. Santuosa was gagging, and Amora watched the scene unfold askew from her vantage point. Her stepbrother didn't cry long before he was silenced permanently. The queen was put out of her misery after that as well. Amora stared up at the roof of the royal chambers. She had escaped death once. She knew she wouldn't accomplish that feat twice. Truthfully, she didn't care. The black-masked soul destroyer stepped over the girl. He hesitated for a moment, cocking his head to one curious side as he prepared to strike. The weapon dangled over her face. She didn't react. This seemed to upset the sadistic intruder as she noticed his brow furrow. With a loud bang, the black-masked face kicked backwards and a red spout of blood and brain matter exploded from the back of his head. Amora wasn't sure what happened, but she was suffocating anyways. She would be dead soon. Another masked face made himself visible to her. He was wearing a scarlet hood and had a bandaged face with one of the goggle lenses cracked. It was Prostati. Amora was glad to see her silent friend in death. She wondered when she would see her family. She was lifted up and over his shoulder. She smiled as she imagined she was being taken to her mother. It would be good to see Ada again. She had many questions for her. They jumped off the balcony and into the darkness beyond. Amora blacked out. Thank you for listening. I'm Bryce Newberger, and this has been the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. If you enjoyed what you heard and you'd like to purchase the full book, then either look up New Books on the Google Play bookstore, NEU Books, or simply click the link in the description. The book is only $5, and I appreciate your support.